Hi, I'm going to talk today about social structure. We have been talking about the types of societies, um, how they have changed over time, but within any society, whether it is pre-industrial, industrial, post-industrial, each one has this thing called social structure. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about why that's important and what it gives us as far as understanding our behavior in relationship to the larger social environment. We're going to be talking about several things in addition that relate to social structure. We're going to talk about status and roles, talking about how they are important to us in terms of our behavior, what they give to us as far as our behavioral expectations. And there are two interesting theories that I'm going to talk about. One is very simple, status and roles, and then the other goes by the very fancy name of dramaturgy, which talks about presentation of self and impression management. So a few things we can pick up in this lecture. Okay, so what do I mean by social structure? It's essentially the framework of society. Again, it's not something that we can touch or put our fingers on. This is a concept that sociologists have come up with, but we can see it in certain bureaucracies by an organization chart, and so I'll use that as an example. But essentially, the structure surrounds us. And what it shows us is how people are related to each other, a hierarchy or equal to each other. So we're drawing ourselves a mental picture of what a society must look like. It gives people the position in society, and we'll look at this, we'll call this a status. Okay? But what's so very important about these positions and the relationships is that it sets behavior. It guides the behavior of the people who are within this framework. Social interaction takes place within this social structure. Here I've made a small organization chart using El Camino as an example. It's not the full organization chart, but I think it will give us an idea as to what we're talking about in terms of social structure. We see at the top there is a board of trustees. Underneath is a president. Underneath the president are 4 vice presidents. I think there's actually 5 now. Bureaucracies tend to grow along the way. On one side, you can see that there are more clerical or maintenance type of situations where you have directors of departments, administrative assistants, and clerical workers. This vice president over on the far right would be the one that might be responsible for the academic world. So under this person would be a dean, like the dean of the social sciences, the dean of humanities. It's an academic word for director, so they're called deans. But under those are the instructors, and of course under the instructors are the students. Okay. So looking at this social structure, what does it tell us? Okay. Think back to the last slide. It shows us a hierarchy. It shows us who is at the top, who is under each person, and goes all the way down to those people who have lesser authority. They are lower on the pecking order, lower on the hierarchical structure. So what this shows us are relationships and who has power. This is going to bring us also some titles. This is the president of the college. This is the vice president of academic affairs. All right, so it gives the person a title, and with that title comes a job description. So think about that. The job description for the deans is not the same as that for the instructors, and the job description for the instructors is not the same as the job description for the students. And so we begin to see a framework in which we have positions, we have hierarchy, we have relationships, and we have some sense of responsibilities, job descriptions, as I use the term. Okay, here are the words that sociologists would use for that organization chart that I just described to you. They use the term status. Status is the position in society that comes with a set of expectations. So the dean is one status, the vice president is another status, and the president, of course, is another status. Okay. There are two types of statuses, one that is ascribed. It's the one you're born with that is unlikely to change. Okay, so you might have been born male as opposed to female, so that would be an ascribed status. Okay, we know when we get to the chapter on gender that some of that is beginning to change, and so an ascribed status can be changed, but again, unlikely in the society, and at least not likely without some conflict or confrontations in the society. An achieved status is one we have earned through our individual effort, or that is imposed by others. So this is going to be very, very important. Sometimes people would say, okay, you were born as a male, so therefore we're going to tell you that you are a male. So it's imposed by someone else. Right? Now, again, this is going to become very interesting and complicated as we continue along the way. Just to make the point, there are many statuses, positions in our life. It would be very easy if there were only 2 or 3, but in a industrialized and now post-industrialized world, this is one of the consequences, that people take on more statuses, that there is more expected of them, that this may cause a lot of conflict, as we will see later. So here's just some statuses, positions that I hold: woman, teacher, mother, wife, daughter, sociologist, friend, grandmother, volunteer, upper middle class, professor. All of that. There are even more. I cannot lose the status of being a pet owner, because that's something, again, that I have to fit into all of these other responsibilities that I have. So this is the positions that I occupy in the society. There is something that sociologists call our master status. That's the position or status that seems to override all others and affects all other statuses that we possess in our status set. You might think of your master status right now as student, because it's the one that overrides everything else. You should and probably do give it the most attention, and it affects all other statuses that you have right now. I would see my master status, looking back over a long lifetime, hindsight is 20/20, but looking back, I would say my master status has been woman, because that has affected all the other positions that I have in that status set that I showed you. So that this overrides all others and affects all others. Now, was this master status ascribed or achieved? Again, think about it. Sometimes our ethnicity might be the master status, not because you wanted it to be, but because the society that you live in has said that's the most important thing about you, and it affects everything else. Is that the way it should be? I don't think so. But again, we're looking at reality versus the ideal culture that we'd like to have. And I think in reality, sometimes a master status is something that is ascribed to us as opposed to something we have achieved. In addition to status, there is also something called the roles. The roles are the norms that come with that status. Society sets these norms. Their behaviors, obligations, privileges attached to a status or to a particular position. Go back again to that organization chart of El Camino College. What we saw there was statuses, but I said each one had a job description. That would be what the roles are, your job description. what is expected of a person, it forms the basis of interaction. I would interact differently with another instructor than I would interact with the president of the college or interact with the dean of the division that I'm in, simply because there are different role expectations. Okay? And of course, we interact differently with students than we do with other instructors. So this role expectation forms the basis of interaction. Does it change? Yes. Again, society is always in flux. It is changing. There are different expectations today as to what a woman should do as opposed to 50 years ago. And so this is going to keep evolving. How do we know this? Again, through social interaction, we are told. Some of that social interaction today is occurring over social media, a different process. But again, we learn it and it's given to us by others in the society. There is a term called role strain. Sociologists use this to refer to conflicting role expectations within one status. If that makes sense. So your status is student. You have many role expectations, as you well know. Sometimes you have to study for an exam, but on the same day, your paper is due for another class. So you have two role expectations that are causing a strain, that are like overloading you. So that's role strain. It's one status in which there are conflicting or too many role expectations. Role conflict is another term that sociologists use, but it's a little bit different. It involves two different statuses, two different positions that you occupy. And again, I'm sure this is a familiar one for you, that you are a student, but you're also a worker, right? So you have to have a set of different role expectations for every status. As a student, you're expected to be at class. On exam day, you're definitely expected to be there. As a worker, you have to be on time with the job, or sometimes you might have to work an extra shift. And this may cause a conflict between different statuses. So role conflict is when there is more than one status and the role expectations within those statuses are causing conflict for the person. This is very simple. Role exit is exactly what it says. You're leaving a status, say you're graduating from college, and the roles associated with it, all the behavioral expectation. Usually we mark those occasions, what we call a rite of passage. I'm sure you've heard that term before. We have a graduation ceremony, we might have a wedding ceremony, a bachelor party, all of those things, because you're leaving one position and all the things that are expected of that position. And so you have to mark it formally in some type of celebration. Okay, another explanation or another way of looking at how people perform their roles or their behavioral expectations in a society is to use the analogy of a drama or play. Here's the theater, and you're looking at the stage. The people who are sitting in the theater are the audience, and we are going to bring players out onto this stage. Okay, so let's see what this brings us in terms of the framework of society, the statuses, and the behavioral expectations. Okay, the gentleman who gave us this particular way of looking at things, his name is Goffman. He worked in a mental health hospital, and after watching how people behave, he came up with this idea, and he called it dramaturgy, how people present themselves. So he compares social interaction and this self that we show to others to the theater, where individuals take on positions, what they call roles there, and act them out for an audience. So again, what he's saying is this is a social situation In this social situation, you have an audience, okay? And you have a part that you are playing, you know, a social part. Suppose you have been invited to a friend's house, all right, to have dinner that night. So you have all these people there who are the audience, and your role is the friend of this person who has invited you, and you have certain things that you want to present to this audience. You want to show yourself in a certain light, okay? So Goffman talks about the front stage and the backstage. The front stage is what we allow people to see. The backstage is like going home and being in your room by yourself, because then you don't have an audience and you don't care, you know, that you throw your clothes on the floor or whatever, that, you know, for your hair may be a mess and you just want to get some sleep, whatever. That's the backstage. And we know that the backstage of the theater is very often looking disorganized. People are taking off costumes, they're putting on other costumes, etc. along the way. So Goffman referred to this as impression management. How are we going to present ourselves? Well, how are we going to, think about going to your friend's house. What are you going to wear? Are you going to take a gift for your friend or your friend's mother? Are you going to say certain things? You know, how are you going to look? So just like the actors on the stage, we are using props. We are using language. We are using clothing. We are using, you know, whatever everybody uses to present whatever they are, or however they want people to see them. So dramaturgy essentially talks about how we present ourselves to other people, and we do it by this impression management. This is a good example from a play. The play is Hamlet. And again, think about all the things in the theater. There is the set behind them. There is the costumes they wear. There are the positions that they take. There is the words that they speak, the actions that they do. I have seen Hamlet done in many different ways. I think Mel Gibson was the one that did Hamlet in a New York City setting, bringing it up to date. Wasn't very good, but that's okay. It makes the point that you can do the same play in many different impressions. Okay? You can manage them in different ways. And the same is true of your social life. Okay, I hope that makes sense, that the organization, the structure of society, creates a framework in which we interact. We talked about statuses and roles, the positions and the expected behavior that society gives us by creating this structure. And again, remember, it's in a constant state of change. Society gives us a script. This is where we use the term dramaturgy. So it gives us the script to perform in different situations. I use the example of going to a friend's house for dinner. You could be going on a first date, a third date. These are situations that society has told us how to behave or what is expected behavior. We create an impression to fit the situation that we manage through props, which include background, clothing, speech, and behavior.